Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, and welcome to my review of the Renegade Commando. Okay, so if you're a normal subscriber of mine, you'll know that Lexmoto also is the distributor of and they lent me this bike for a long-term review to basically see what I think of it. I've done this with lots of different models of bike, and this was something different. I've never really been one about the cruiser style, especially not in a 125, and I thought, you know, I've got to push my experiences and try things. And I love this bike. It's been such a pleasant surprise. The first thing we're going to do is talk about the looks, controls, bits and pieces like that on the bike, and then we'll get out on the road. But I want to do this bit first as we're already off the bike. So there's a couple of things to point out. It's quite a large bike, lengthwise. It's got about a 75 or 750mm seat height, and it weighs 179 kilos as a curb weight, and it's only got about 9.5 kilowatts of power. So you're thinking, whoa. It's big, it's heavy, and it's got a small engine. That must make it rubbish. It actually is great, even with a pillion. As I say, the video's already made on this. I've done a top speed run. I've given my impressions of how I find riding a cruiser is different. And I even took my other half Reno on the back, and we saw how this bike was with a pillion. And it was absolutely fantastic. Those are separate videos that if you want to know more information, you can actually go and watch. Now the Renegade is this model of bike, and then they have different looks that have different names. This is the Commando, which is made to look like, I think, a World War II old American Army bike maybe. Now for some people that might be an issue, they might not like that, but for some people they might think it looks pretty cool. I think it looks pretty cool. It's just the star on the tank and the green matte paint that's kind of doing it. And maybe the slightly off, you know, these slightly knobbly tyres that they fitted onto it. Or are they just more like more old school tyres? I don't know. But looks are in the eye of the beholder, so if you like it, you're going to like it. If you don't, you don't. Is there anything else I want to mention before I sit on it? Yes, actually, there is a couple of things. Did I mention it's water cooled? That's a fantastic addition to have on a small engine. Seat. There is no under-seat storage. In fact, from what I understand, or what I can tell, to take this seat off, you have to undo this bolt, which takes this seat off, and that will gain you access to bolts to take this seat off. So no under-seat storage whatsoever. Not that there's really any room for it. However, there is, and when I discovered this, I was like, man, that's a sneaky little stash place on a bike. It's actually for the toolkit, which isn't in it at the moment, because when this was used at a show, they needed the toolkit out of it. So I didn't get it. But I can show you this, which is, this is a very unassuming little panel, isn't it? The only thing that's slightly strange about it is that, which at first look looks like a keyhole, but it isn't. It is just a thing, you can put anything in there and turn it. And that will unlock that. And then, how do you do this again? You pull off one side, and then you slide it out. And then in here, how do you get this off? Oh, the entire thing comes out. I didn't realise that. I'm not sure it was supposed to do that. But there's a little stash box, which is actually where your toolkit belongs. Can that just wedge back in there? Will it? Actually, yeah, that just goes back in place. That pushes back through. And that locks back up. So yeah, very covert little stash place in it. Not a lot of room. This is metal. This is metal. This is metal. This sounds like armour plate. The tank is massive and metal. These bars, they're metal, and this is metal. There's a lot of this bike is metal, and it has a very large exhaust on it. To be honest, this exhaust doesn't sound fantastic. It really stifles the sound of the bike. But if you're not really worried about it making a lot of noise, then it's absolutely fine. But it is a bazooka. But then maybe that's fitting for an army bike. As I say, I'm not a huge fan of cruisers and the look of them, but this I really like because it looks like an old school bike rather than like, you know, like a, I don't know, some chopper. This just looks like an old Harley. Kind of. Okay, calm down, kind of. I know some people can get quite annoyed about that. Okay, well I don't think there's anything else to point out off the bike. Oh, other than this, it has a USB charger here. Now that is not authentic World War II army bike. Okay, so the ignition's up here. I have noticed a little bit of misting going on in here where water's got in at some point, and it's just taking a bit of time to get out. It comes and goes with humidity. If I took this apart and cleaned it out, yeah, I guess I could solve that. But that is something that happened, I just have to say. But what you can't really see on the screen at the moment, but when it warms up you can, is on this little digital screen you've got a fuel gauge, you've got a gear position indicator and your odometer, and there's a little button here that changes your trip and stuff like that on there. It's a little bar type fuel gauge. To be honest with you, it's almost completely useless because you really have to look down to even look at this, and you shouldn't really be doing that. But also, it's really small, so you really do have to like go, oh, what's it say? So it's more of a sort of when you're stopped, okay, let's check it. I won't advise looking at that. So the gear position indicator on there is, well, it's meaningless. You're never going to, other than stopping, it really doesn't matter. Speedo, as I've mentioned before, it's very small. You have the miles an hour on the inside, the kilometres on the outside. It's very difficult to see when you're going along without sort of really taking time to take your eyes off the road again. Don't like that. But what I do know is that straight ahead is 50 miles an hour, and I can sort of work out tangents, and that's how I've been just giving it a glance down to be like, oh, I know where I am roughly. Controls, completely basic. Clutch, flasher light, high beam, low beam, indicator, horn. Oh, it's cute. Kill switch, hazard lights, and the starter button, obviously front brake, rear brake this side, and the gear shifter is this side. There is one thing about the controls that I really don't like, and it's that indicator switch. I found it to be jammy and a bit sticky and a bit sort of difficult to get on with, and the cancelling is a little bit... To start with, I was really having problems with it. Now, I'm fine. It's just you've got to be very deliberate. It's a very deliberate push, very deliberate cancel, very deliberate... See, there it caught up for a second. Actually, I think I've just found out what the problem is. If you in any way touch the button on the top while you're trying to do it, it'll lock up like that. Can you see it? I control what I like, but it's not going to work. Let that button pop out, and then it works. So you have to be very careful to push from this side and push from this side and not touch that button. I hadn't actually realised till now exactly that's why it was doing that. Let's just get going, shall we? So as I always mention, I am 6'4". I'm not a small chap, and I actually fit very comfortably on this bike. I don't think I could be much taller though, because the only issue that I come into is that the pillion seat, you know, where I showed you it was a secondary seat, it's the join between the two is where my butt just wants to be. So it's a little bit annoying in that sense. It would be nicer if the seat was a continuous one piece of foam that was double staged maybe. But then again, I'm 6'4", so, you know, this is not going to affect 99% of the people who try and ride this bike. But when I do get myself in the right position, I'm sat upright, my arms are nice and loose, and it's a very comfortable experience with your feet slightly out forward. They're not completely out forward, they're just slightly forward of down. It's an incredibly comfortable position and not something that I'd experienced before. You know, I've ridden many, many, many bikes, but never cruisers. Well, just one Triumph America once. And as I was saying earlier on, I've never really been into cruisers that much. Especially 125 cruisers, because they tend to be heavy and quite slow. And for a 125, that's not something you want. Top speed on this bike is, well, I've got 68 on it. With all, you know, 15 stone and 6'4" of me, so some people that might be a bit smaller, a little less wind drag, might actually top the 70 mark. But this bike is not about that. This bike is about cruising. It's a cruiser. And for just comfortable riding around town, I absolutely have loved having this thing. It's been fun. I'm always like, oh, I'll take the UM. That's a good laugh. Just, I think because it's comfortable and it's different, and it's so happy going slower speeds because of the way that the gearing's quite long and the way that the engine is, that around town riding is very pleasant. I don't know if you'll hear it, but every now and then you do hear as you go over the bumps, because the suspension on this is pretty firm. you can hear a bit of clattering. This bike has got an enormously long chain. It is massive. It has chain guards in the sense to stop the chain smacking the bottom of your swing arm, and a nice thick one at that too, which is great because, as I say, because it's so long, it suffers from chain slap. It maybe could do with a little bit of a tighten, but yeah, as I say, I've certainly noticed a little bit of chain slap, and I do think maybe a guide would have been a good idea for that. But then again, that might add a lot more noise, and it's not that bad. Oh, this is so much fun to ride around, I love it. Almost scraping the pegs. I haven't as yet managed to actually scrape the pegs. I've got very, very close, but they haven't got little, scrape pegs or anything, or little nubs on them. It's just rubber. You really shouldn't be sticking them into the ground. Oh, I haven't mentioned the price. This bike, all of this, is yours for just about £2,300, £2,400. I was amazed at that. I thought they were going to say, 3233, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, that seemed probably about right. I know the UMs are normally a little bit more expensive, because they've got the water-cooled engines and such. But no, damn, this is a cheap bike. The build quality compared to other Lex Motos is as good as the other Lex Motos, the better ones, and if in some places a bit better. This is very heavily built, as I mentioned, and well, the weight tells it all. And because of that heft, this bike's actually pretty surprising, because as I say, it's heavy, and it's only got 9.5 kilowatts of power, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels fine. It's got pull. Yeah, it's not rip-roaringly fast, but a lot of it is to do with knowing where to have the engine, where it produces its most power. This especially comes in when it comes to pulling away, because if you don't get the revs in the right place, it just takes a bit to get away. Whereas if you get them just at the right point, it's actually not bad off the spot. I'm sat out at comfy cruising speed, the engine's quite happy at this, and if I open the throttle, it takes a while to build, but it definitely builds. But it does take a bit to get up there. So this is one of those 125s that's very much about momentum and keeping up the speed. Again, obviously, this is a cruiser. It's not designed to be fast at riding or fast around corners or anything like that. But I've actually found it to be a proper laugh to try and throw around a bit. Now, where the front wheel is a long way out there, I have noticed that under very heavy braking, you can get a little bit of squeal on the front wheel. Now, that might be a combination of the tyres, but I think it also has something to do with how far out that front wheel is, that it hasn't got weight directly over it. This has got link brakes, if I haven't mentioned that, and they are very good and strong brakes at that. Link brakes, if you don't know, are where when you pull the front brake, you get front brake and a little bit of rear. When you press the rear brake, you get rear brake and a little bit of front. It's Euro 4 rules. A bike these days either has to have that or ABS. If this had ABS, it would be a lot more expensive. So you win some, you lose some of these things. And the most amazing thing, as I say, was when it was me and Reno on this bike, it was still doing great. Yeah, it stunted its performance somewhat, but it wasn't that bad. But then again, maybe I'm thinking of this from the wrong perspective. Someone who wants a cruiser, maybe not the person to say, well, what's its top speed? Will it do a wheelie? No, it will not do a wheelie. Not unless you go off a ramp. As I say, if you want to see the flat-out performance of this bike, go and watch my Renegade Commando top speed video, and you can see me attempting to get the absolute maximum I possibly could out of this. And again, if you want to see what it's like with the pillion, I'll put these videos in the description just so you know what they're kind of about. Of course, it is fuel injected, as with all Euro 4 bikes these days, and it's a smooth fuel injection system. It's not the worst one I felt at all. It feels more like it's almost like the resolution's more. Like with some bikes, it's like there's like 8 stages from closed throttle to full throttle. This feels like it's got a lot more. It might be just my mind, a placebo effect, but it certainly is better than some of the other ones that I've tried. As you can notice, yes, the suspension is pretty firm. It's very comfortable for most things, but when you get to a big bump, it has got a bit of a jar up the butt about it. I want to show you. Actually, let's try the turning circle. Oh, that was something else. Yes, manoeuvrability on this bike is much better than I thought it would be, and it's not necessarily that difficult to balance because you're lower down. It's actually very good. Right, I was talking about pulling away on this bike and how you need to make sure the engine's at just the right point and get your gear changes at just the right point. And what I mean by that is this. So you've got to keep it at that level, and you've got to keep it changing gear and keeping it at that higher revs. And it just picks up so much better than if you let off too much before you change gear. So the gear lever has got a bit of movement to it, so you do need to be very deliberate with your gear changes, but where it is in front of your feet, it's quite easy to make sure you kick up or kick down as much as you need to. Is that a crab? Why was there a crab on the road? Oh, shall I? I'm going to give it a blast at the dual carriageway. Why not? And this is exactly where getting the pull away speed right is so important, getting off the line. Because if you don't get it right, you'll be more sluggish. Or wait for the cars to close the gap. Absolutely no problem. Let's see what the UM has got. Brakes are good. I love the brakes on this. Oh, oh no. Let me in. Thank you, kind person. Oh, there's also neutral lights and things displaying down here, which normally, this is basically a dash, but it's just tiny and not much use. There is a neutral light, so I suppose you can see when you're neutral. There is something else I've noticed about this bike that's interesting, which is that throughout all the bikes that I've reviewed over the past few years, I've had a few people come up and talk to me about them occasionally. The one that the most non-bikers have come and asked me about is this one. Maybe it's because it's just a classic looking bike or it's recognisable in some way, but just people seem to think like, oh, that's really cool, what's that? I think a lot of people do think it's a much bigger hog till you start the engine. I probably forgot to mention, it does have a side stand and a centre stand, and centre stands are always very useful. I just realised I haven't talked about fuel economy. This bike absolutely sips its fuel. It really doesn't use hardly any. Filtering through traffic, absolutely fine. So my conclusion is that I was massively surprised about how much fun this bike was to ride, and how it is a very different style of riding to other sorts of bikes, but it's very pleasant because it's very relaxed. Because you've got a very low down bike, you know, it just leans through the corners without any effort, and you can just sit back, enjoy the ride. It's great. If you're trying to find the fastest 125 in the world or the best cornering or something like that, this bike, it's not going to be for you. But I think for the people who want a bike that looks like this, they're not going to worry about all that so much. And for £2,300, £2,400, it's an absolute steal in my mind. I should mention, not only is it only that much money, but also you get the 2-year parts and labour warranty that you get with the Lex Motos, and that is now, if you buy it in one dealer, it's valid in any other dealer, whereas before you had to only do it from the one dealership, so that's great. And they also give you a year's free breakdown cover as standard, unlimited. And I think they've done that to just be like, because a lot of people say things about Chinese bikes, as they will in the comments of this video, and it doesn't matter that I've been riding these bikes for 10 years and I'm honest with you about everything with them. Yeah, some bits aren't as good, but then you're paying half the price as some of the equivalents. But by giving people those 2 years of warranty and labour cover and the breakdown cover, it's like, well, if anything happens, I'm pretty much covered. Well, there we go. That's where I'm going to draw an end to my review of the Renegade Commando 125cc. It is a bloody fun little bike to ride around, especially in the summer. Like days like this, just cruising around. seeing how far you can lean it. It's awesome, I love it. Well, huge thanks to my Patreon supporters who are going up the screen as we speak. I really do appreciate the help from you people. Also the people who support me through the Spicy 110 Metalworks. If you're not aware, I am a scrap metal artist. I make clocks and things out of motorcycle parts. You will love them. Go and have a look. Links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. It really does help my channel out. And if you want to see more bike reviews, more videos on how to ride a bike, I have a playlist called Tips for New Riders. Check that out. It's on my channel. Seriously, 30 something videos of pure gold if you want to get onto two wheels. So until the next one, bye bye. If you enjoyed this video and the other content on the channel, please consider following the links in the description to show your support.